my journey was has been very rewarding. But initially, of course, in India, everybody thinks, A, you're homosexual, or you're confused, or you're doing it for all the wrong reasons. They second guess your intentions. So for me, it was a struggle to kind of make my family understand that I was doing it for all the right reasons, and this is who I wanted to be. And the only focus was to educate myself well and to be successful, because I think in my success, eventually, people found answers. When I realized I wasn't doing something wrong and God has a meaningful place for me, I made up my mind that I will not shed a single tear and I'll face whatever comes with fortitude. And that realization dawned pretty quickly. I think within 2 to 3 years of me starting hormones and being misjudged, and when I started seeing changes in my body, in myself, my career started to pick up. Then I realized that, I think I'm here to stay. I think for transgender people, you have to understand that you want to be a gender of whatever choice you want to transition to. There is nothing called transgender behavior. Politics has been extremely encouraging, because I was brought in by Madam Jayalalitha. She was a huge source of support, and the way she brought me in was in front of about 35 lakh people, where she announced me as a spokesperson in a public meeting, which I think kind of set the tone for everybody in the party to accept me. I had the opportunity to compete with every other gender, and I think I proved myself with my work, and I think that helped me get a foothold as an individual, and not just because as a transgender person.
On Table Talk today is Apsara Reddy, a transgender politician, perhaps one of the few in the country. She speaks to me about her political journey, also whether anything has changed on the ground for the LGBTQ community, and if her journey is one of exception.
Thank you for taking the time out today. I know you're busy and you have your schedules all mapped out, and you've got to head out immediately after this, but it's a conversation that has been due for a long time through COVID. I think somebody or the other is constantly between the two of us been down with COVID. So I'm not going to take much time, and I'm going to just quickly kickstart this conversation. Apsara Reddy is a politician. She is the national spokesperson for the AIADMK. She's also a journalist from my fraternity, so always glad to meet people from the same fraternity. And a remarkable journey of pride and politics, as we're speaking about today, and lots more to hear about her journey, actually. So kickstarting this conversation, Apsara, with you on your journey first. Let's begin with that. From Ajay Reddy to Apsara Reddy, what has that journey been like?
It has been very rewarding, Jyotsna, and first of all, I must thank you for making space for diverse voices on your show, and I think it's my pleasure and privilege to join you, because I've followed your journey as a journalist for many, many years, and I think your stint at NDTV was so inspiring, and whatever you do now, it continues to inspire. So I'm really happy to share this space with you, and also it's always nice to see front runners in the journalistic space who are women. So thank you. But I think starting off, my journey was has been very rewarding. But initially, of course, in India, everybody thinks, A, you're homosexual, or you're confused, or you're doing it for all the wrong reasons. They second guess your intentions. So for me, it was a struggle to kind of make my family understand that I was doing it for all the right reasons, and this is who I wanted to be. And the only focus was to educate myself well and to be successful, because I think in my success, eventually, people found answers. I don't think people cared so much about my gender anymore when I started putting runs on the table, and that was something which was a realization for me, that I made such drastic choices, but because of some amazing mentors, some great editors, some great bosses that I had the opportunity to compete with every other gender, and I think I proved myself with my work, and I think that helped me get a foothold as an individual, and not just because as a transgender person.
When we speak about the pride community, we speak about the LGBTQ community. What is always standing out is the first barrier of support, in a sense, that comes from the family, and that comes or does not come. What was it like for you?
See, Mum was extremely supportive. Obviously, people in India, especially in South Indian families, there's very little awareness of what transgender individuals are. So there's always this impression of, those common sights and sounds of transgender people you see on the street, or or they think you're homosexual, or you're somebody who's gay. And I had to, kind of convince them and have multiple lengthy conversations, often emotional and often frustrating, that this is who I wanted to be, and there's a safe psychological and medical way to do this. So I had mum on board. It was very difficult to get the rest of them on board, but I think eventually when I started doing well academically, making the choices I made to go to Australia and to London, getting scholarships, working for the Indian Embassy, interviewing prime ministers and Michael Schumacher, I think then people sat up and took notice and said, hey, she's still intelligent, she's still articulate, she's still the same person, she just wants to be a gender of her choice. And I think for me, initially it was very difficult. I used to come back home and cry and say, why was the world so cruel? But then when I realized I wasn't doing something wrong and God has a meaningful place for me, I made up my mind that I will not shed a single tear and I'll face whatever comes with fortitude. And that realization dawned pretty quickly. I think within 2 to 3 years of me starting hormones and being misjudged, and when I started seeing changes in my body, in myself, my career started to pick up, then I realized that, I think I'm here to stay, and no matter how many psychology or religious textbooks you throw at me, I'm here to stay.
Did you just mention interviewing Michael Schumacher?
Yes, I did. I interviewed him in Australia when he was there for the Grand Prix, and it got published in the Hindu.
Amazing. But I'm going back to, you speak about the hormone therapy and the changes in the body. For an individual, what are those changes like? I mean, you're fighting that other bigger battle outside, but, you're also internally going through a lot of journey.
See, I think in India, what people have to understand is, and this is something which is controversial, and I say it all the time and I get into trouble, but I'm going to say it. I think for transgender people, you have to understand that you want to be a gender of whatever choice you want to transition to. There is nothing called transgender behavior. A lot of times I see homosexual, gay individuals either cross-dressing or enhancing themselves, which is fine. I mean, they have a right to do so, and they should. But being transgender is completely different. You completely transition to a gender of your choice. So there's hormone therapy. There's also gender reassignment. You're living 24/7. You're putting on your real face to the real world. So when people ask me that, how does it feel to be transgender? I'm a woman now. I'm completely a woman. My passport says I'm female. I'm biologically completely a woman, and anatomically I'm a woman. So I feel when people say, oh, you don't behave like a transgender, I've said, what is transgender behavior? So when you see people clapping hands or flashing on the streets or using abusive language, these are individuals who've not really thought through the decision. They've not really thought through the gender, what gender they want to be. They're quite, I think homosexual individuals sometimes take the plunge, do everything that they have to for the wrong reasons, and they end up regretting the transition. And that's when they exhibit a certain behavior. And I feel to be transgender, you need to go to the right counseling. You need to emotionally, internally, in every aspect, feel like a woman, whether it's with your family, at work, with your romantic partner. I think you're either a man or a woman. There's nothing called transgender behavior. When people say, why don't you behave like a transgender? I'm like, what is transgender behavior? And why should I be why should we create these micro groups when we want to mainstream ourselves?
But there's, of course, the new, the whole gender fluidity phenomena that is taken over this young generation now. Do you sense that there is a little bit of confusion when it comes to the younger generation?
See, I really feel gender fluidity is something which I understand and empathize and support and celebrate. I think each individual has a right to dress a certain way, express themselves a certain way. But I think when you say, why don't, my only issue is with the LGBT community, when from the outside, when people ask me, why don't you behave like a transgender? Or why don't you attend, pride marches? Or why don't you go for these, the kind of transgender festivals? Or why don't you take part in, they have these yearly pujas. I don't feel the need to. I've mainstreamed myself, and I think my life is a message for people to kind of access mainstream spaces. I think if you have the will to do so and the courage to come this far, I think you should go that extra mile and kind of mainstream yourself, because that's where sustainable livelihoods and sustainable employment happens.
When you talk of mainstream, I don't think there's anything more mainstream than politics, Apsara. What has that platform been like for you? Politics
has been extremely encouraging, because I was brought in by Madam Jayalalitha. She was a huge source of support, and the way she brought me in was in front of about 35 lakh people, where she announced me as a spokesperson in a public meeting, which I think kind of set the tone for everybody in the party to accept me. But yeah, of course, there are a lot of people say, "Aap kya fashion designer ho, ya makeup artist ho? Aap kya clubs mein nachte the pehle?" I said, no, this is what I do, and why should transgender women be relegated to just dancing in clubs or being, being a fashion designer, makeup. No offense, I mean those professions are all great, but why can't you be a pilot or a journalist or a war correspondent or whatever? Why should you have to be a makeup artist? And I get a lot of that when I meet people in politics who want to hurt you, who want to kind of disregard it. So, आप तो शादियों में नाचते हो. I said, नहीं, मैं तो नाचती नहीं थी, पर नाचूंगी भी नहीं. So I face that a lot in politics, but that comes from a lot of jealousy because I'm able to find the foothold in the party with the top rung leadership. I'm projected the right way. I'm positioned the right way. I'm able to draw crowds, touch wood. But I think that has kind of made people, especially women, less accepting of me in politics. I think men are far more supportive. Women sometimes want to wish me away, or in their speeches sometimes they try to say, oh, we empathize with you, we feel pity for you, we feel sympathy for you. But I'm like, hey, I'm not here for your sympathy or pity. I'm here on stage because of my merit. I'm here on stage because I'm on equal footing with you. So I cut the sympathy, and I think we should relate to each other as equals.
So you've gone from the BJP to the Congress to the AIADMK, where you initially started with as well.
So I have to clarify. I never joined the BJP. I was given an award by Mr. Amit Shah and Madam Tamilisai, who was the Tamil Nadu BJP head at that point. So when I did have lunch with Mr. Amit Shah at a hotel, the photograph was leaked and a newspaper carried an article. And when they asked me about the award, I did say very complimentary things, which I meant about Mr. Amit Shah and Mr. Modi. But I never joined the party. So then when I retracted the statement, that's when this whole AIADMK invitation happened, and I met Madam Jayalalitha and I joined the party. So when Madam Jayalalitha died, there was a lot of musical chairs in the party. There was like, who's going to lead the party, who's heir apparent, who's going to take her legacy forward. So I didn't want to get into that musical chairs because I worked with everybody and everybody was getting into factions. That's when I left and I went and made a documentary on South India's most notorious prison, which was seen by Derek O'Brien and Montage, and they called me for a conference in Kolkata. When I was at Kolkata after the conference, I sat by the pool, was having coffee in the evening. Sushmita Dev, an MP who was Rahul Gandhi's, now with the TMC, but earlier with Rahul Gandhi, invited me to meet Rahul Gandhi and said, hey, why don't you think of joining the Congress? I said, yeah, I'd love to meet him. And when I did meet him, he gave me a fantastic role as a National General Secretary of the Women's Wing, which I thought was great and a step in the right direction towards mainstreaming. So I took it up. But when elections were approaching in Tamil Nadu and the leadership squabbles had settled, I was invited back to AIADMK, which I felt was the perfect move because electorally that is my space.
So what is your assessment of what is the reception of LGBTQ rights by the political parties across the board?
I think it's very tokenistic. It's a lot to do with photo opportunity and also what do you call welfare measures. They want to be seen giving you saris or rice bags or grocery or taking photographs with you and empathizing with you. But I don't think they genuinely envision a roadmap for you politically. And for me, as an individual who is extremely focused and hardworking, I feel that roadmap is something which I have created for myself. And along the way came allies because they found me credible enough and they found me drawing crowds, found me where people had no inhibition. So why should the leader have inhibition? So whichever state I go to or whichever constituency I go to, the leader found it complimentary to have me with him or to campaign with him, and then they made that space. But I fought for that space. I don't think they invite you naturally or they genuinely want you there. But when you start speaking on TV, when you start using Twitter in the right format, and I think if you connect with the masses, they can't ignore you, and that's how I've made my way.
So what about society? Is society, is inclusion a little bit better, or are things moving in the right direction?
Society, I think, I must say this, are very open to hanging out, partying, and men are very open to dating trans women. But I don't think when it comes to marriage or long-term relationships or settling down, I think there's a long way to go because I still feel this taboo. A lot of, and I have to say this on the personal front, not that it applies to me, but it applies to many in my community. There are a lot of men who would daringly date a trans woman, but when it comes to marriage, they will hark back to what their mom tells them to be, or dad tells them, and they'll marry another woman and have this great shadi. But they come back and have a parallel life with a trans woman, which I feel is such a cowardly thing to do because you either don't get married at all, and continue your relationship, or stay with the person you get married to. Because a lot of trans women I know are in relationships with men who are already married to women. And that's for me is a very difficult thing to accept, because I feel as trans women you've come this far, and I think you deserve dignity in relationships too. And if that relationship doesn't work, my message to my trans sisters is let them go.
Yes, I think it's something that we've been seeing for a while, right? I mean, behind the scenes, there's that other life that is that we've always heard about, or heard snippets of. But Supreme Court recently, Apsara, of course, is in a welcome step said that family, same-sex couples, the LGBT community, it is part of the same definition of a family. So are courts actually doing what a lot of us should be doing?
I think the courts are taking cognizance of what is happening, but I think just a court's observational ruling doesn't change mindsets en masse. I think it has to come at each home, where parents tell their sons and daughters to accept diversity, to respect love of all kinds. I don't think certain kind of love should be dealt with in silence. I think every love should be celebrated. And I feel also parents, when they realize that their kid is transgender, please don't try to, transgender, gay or lesbian, please don't try to cure them, because I know of a lot of instances where parents have taken kids to babas, to psychiatric wards, where they've been given electric shocks, or they've been given medication which constantly antidepressants, which they get hooked onto, or these babas who internally keep them in the ashram and actually inflict sexual violence. So this is something, my message to parents is, I think your child's right to happiness and dignity is far more important than what society has to say about them.
But how do you change mindsets?
I think with society itself, if you have somebody who's transgender, gay or lesbian in your neighborhood, in your son's class or daughter's class, or in your building, please show support. Because in those small support systems, they can find strength, they can find answers, they can find peace. Because I think parents are most worried about how will their kids be accepted by society. So immediate society, immediate families, immediate peer groups should show understanding and not say, I've often heard people say, oh, don't send your son to a salon, maybe because that's why he's feminine, or don't send your, daughter out, with a biking group or a trekking group where women have, short hair. And these are mundane things that people say. And it's very hard for parents having that son or daughter at home, because they're constantly trying to, ask the daughter to grow their hair, or the son to man up. And it's very hard. I know of a case in interior Tamil Nadu where this girl expressed that she was lesbian. Her parents took her to a psychiatrist in a close by smaller town, and that person put her on sleeping pills for about 3 months. And this girl finally realized that it was what it was doing to her body, and then went back to that person and said, listen, I don't want to do these pills and I don't want to cure myself of anything. And the psychiatrist then prescribed breast growth hormones, thinking to feminize her more, and she actually wanted to be a trans man. So these things still happen in remote, in even established families in interior Tamil Nadu, interior India, in smaller cities. Things like this still happen, where there are quack doctors operating or giving medicines or taking them to babas or giving electric shocks. And this has to stop. And the only way it will stop is if parents find courage and people around the parents also offer support and empathy.
What do you think of biphobia, and how should one handle it?
Is there biphobia? Because I've not really heard of anybody saying that there's biphobia, because I think bisexual individuals can very easily convincingly be partners with either gender, and they don't necessarily have to change their behavior. A man can just be with a woman or a man, or a woman can be with both women and a man. So I don't think there is biphobia in the sense as there is gay phobia and homophobia. I don't think transphobia also now is far less, because I think transgender women have become common sights on television shows, on all kinds of platforms. I think the homophobia is much bigger than transphobia or biphobia.
So you were speaking about the kind of things that families resort to, and that comes with that mindset that doesn't change. But also, when we were speaking about the courts, Apsara, what is between what the courts say or between what people say and the implementation on the ground? How much of a gap is there?
There's a huge gap, because even government offices and government institutions and establishments don't really understand what the courts have said. For example, when I passed through immigration or when I pass through security, my passport says female. But even then, because I look a certain way and sound a certain way, I've been very often asked, they find humor in it, and they think they're like showing their authority. Like, why don't you go through the male security check, or why don't you come and explain to us what you've done? I said no, but my passport, the Indian government says I'm female. My passport says, and my records say I'm female. I think I should be accorded the dignity of a female. So this happens a lot, where even if courts have legislated or courts have given orders in favor of LGBT communities, I think government officials lack awareness and lack sensitivity. Police stations lack awareness and sensitivity. They don't even know what sections to apply when you go and complain of molestation, you go and complain of harassment. They don't know what section to apply. They don't want to apply the Women Harassment Act while you're a woman though. So there are a lot of issues which have not percolated down to society and government agencies. And also I feel the largest campaign that anyone does focused towards LGBT communities is HIV/AIDS. I think we need to move past that. I think HIV/AIDS is a common issue to every gender. I think when you target LGBT human interest or social integration campaigns, I think we need to go beyond just health promotion. We need to also look at larger things, like for example, molestation against a transgender individual only draws up to a punishment of 6 months, whereas a woman is raped at 7 years. These need to change. I think governments need to legislate in our favor. For example, the Transgender Rights Bill, which has brought in, speaks against transgender women living in groups in a home. They get into the personal space. Why can't trans women who find support in each other live as a sisterhood? So these things have to change.
But what is the redressal for abuse?
Police stations, which are completely insensitive. We do have human rights organizations, but a lot of times transgender individuals do not get the representation they deserve, and because they belong to a sex trade or because they belong to a certain trade, they automatically assume that the trouble was caused by that individual. I know a lot of instances where young girls have been abused, burned, kerosene thrown upon them, landlords have sexually molested them. When they go to the cop station, the cops blame them and book them instead. So there's a lot of lack of empathy when it comes to trans individuals. Even if they're in the sex workspace, they're doing it because of hunger. They're doing it because of lack of opportunity. They're doing it because families have ostracized them. They have no education. They have no home. They have no job. So they have to get on the streets. But that doesn't mean because they're on the street, they should, sexual violence should be inflicted on them. That's something which I feel that when they go to a police station, like there was a case in Tamil Nadu where this sex worker went to a cop station because she was being harassed, and cops in turn actually threw kerosene on her and burnt it. It became a huge issue. There was huge protests against it.
So how effective do you think are the safe spaces run by government for transgenders?
There are no safe spaces run by governments for transgender people. I don't see any resource center where trans people can actually get the right kind of advice on hormones, right kind of advice on winning familial support or their religion, because a lot of families in South India at least depend on their religious gurus or their pastors or their priests or imams. I don't see any support group where a support center where we have counselors that can reach out to these people in defense of the child. We don't have places where the child can go and ask about hormone therapy or gender reassignment, or come back and speak to them if there's any sexual violence. There's only cop stations, and cop stations are severely understaffed when it comes to counselors. They have no counselors, and they don't understand gender issues.
So when you have a young person who is, struggling with sexual identity, what would you tell that, somebody who's a teenager, what would you tell that person?
I would say that there's a safe space for you and there's a meaningful place for you. God willed you to be who you want to be, so don't suppress your dreams. But whatever you do it in the safest possible medical way and psychological way. Get the support of a counselor. Talk through your issues. First realize if you want to be trans, are you capable of being a trans and living a life of a trans woman? Because it's not just vanity or cosmetics. It's about living that life emotionally and mentally. So get the right kind of counseling support, get the right kind of medical advice. Do try and have your family. It's easy to run away from home, live with friends and live out your fantasy. It's far more difficult to have your family support you, but do it. Don't rebel, don't run away. Try and get people to talk to your parents, have the validation of family, because that's very, very important as you go through the journey.
Apsara, any incident that, still gets you upset?
I don't really, no incident that gets me upset in that sense, but I feel one thing that I would like to change about Indian society is that don't always place so much importance on supremacy on marriage. I don't think marriage is a supreme form of settlement, because the first thing anybody would say to a person with LGBTQ child is, oh, how will they get married, or how will they have kids? A lot of biological women can't have children. A lot of biological women and men are bad parents. A lot of biological men and women married to each other don't live happy lives. So I really think one thing that needs to change is the kind of supreme importance we place on marriage.
My final question, we're going back to politics, and of course, that is such a big part of your life. What would you tell fellow politicians actually when it comes to the community?
I think one day in India you will see a transgender chief minister or a prime minister.
Oh, more power to you and your community then, Apsara. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you. God bless you for all the good work that you're doing, and I think you're amazing. Continue, fighting the good fight, and thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you.